Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever you're watching this episode. We are very grateful for your support here. My name is Dylan Spaulding. So happy to have you here on this Wednesday night as we kickstart this brand new show, this brand new podcast. There's so much we're going to get into here tonight. I'm really looking forward to it. On the first episode of the Auto Racing Digest show, the Auto Racing Digest podcast, whatever you want to call it. We're very excited to be able to launch this inaugural episode. And we get to have it joined by a very special guest here tonight, one of my writers for my website, a guy who has been around the motorsports paddock, the motorsports world for a while, my good friend Liam Herbert. Liam, welcome on to the show, my friend. For anybody who is listening to the show, Liam is our IndyCar writer for ARD. He's also done work with Formula E in the past and some other series as well. So, Liam, welcome on the show, man. We're making history here tonight, the first ever Auto Racing Digest podcast, and we're doing it here on No Filter Network, which we want to give our thanks to No Filter Network for allowing us to use their platform to stream our shows. We'll be on every Wednesday night going forward. Obviously, there may be some nights where we may take some time off due to some racing coverage that we're doing at the track, but man, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to be on this journey with you and the rest of our team at ARD. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me, my friend. It is an honor to kick off this show with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, again, a lot of fun, a lot of exciting topics we're going to dive into here. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we are the only racing show on No Filter Network. So for fans who are out there listening who may be joining us for the first time tonight, we're going to be bringing you something a little bit different. And I hope that does entice you to come along on this journey. If you want to check out our content, scan the QR code up at the top of your screen. You'll be able to access all of our coverage that we do. We also have a YouTube page as well that these shows will be going out onto the page, so you can watch these episodes after the fact as well. After they go live streamed here on No Filter Network, these episodes do last on No Filter for a handful of months, so you'll also have time to watch it here as well. You could also tip us here on No Filter Network, so if you want to help pay for some of our expenses, some of our journey and such that we go on here as we get into the 2025 season, will be very much appreciated. And again, we cannot wait to be able to have you on this kind of exciting new venture that we're doing here with ARD. But just talking about ARD as a whole, obviously we cover motorsports, we cover all forms of racing from NASCAR to IndyCar, all the way down to some of our local level racing at local short tracks and other events as well. Dirt racing, we'll cover that occasionally as well. I do some boat racing as well from time to time. So pretty much anything with an engine in it, anything that has wheels or something in that capacity, we usually will be at the track trying to cover it. And obviously, again, I'll introduce myself. My name is Dylan Spaulding. I've been covering motorsports for about a year and a half now. I grew up a big motorsports fan. IMSA is one of my favorite series, obviously wearing the IMSA shirt here on myself. And, I'm just really excited to bring motorsports to a new community, a new audience. And I think having a podcast weekly talking about what's going on in this day and age of motorsports where it's continually growing, I think we can really provide a new evolution of content in terms of motorsports coverage. So I'm really looking forward to being able to get to know a lot of our viewers, getting to know a lot of our listeners as well. And with that being said, we'll pass it along to my writer, Liam Herbert. I kind of introduce you a little bit, but I want to have you introduce everybody to the audience because we're going to be seeing a lot of you throughout this kind of journey that we embark on here with ARD's racing show.
Absolutely, man. Well, honored to meet all of you, of course. My name's Liam Herbert. As Dylan says, I'm a writer for ARD. I'm a bit of a more recent motorsports fan. I only got into it in the last 4 or 5 years. And the journey and the experience I have kind of gone on in learning about racing and getting to participate in some of these series and cover them has been absolutely one of the coolest things in my life recently. And I cannot wait for everything that's coming in the future and all the stuff Dylan and I I know have been discussing, and all the incredible things for next season as well. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, we got a lot of exciting stuff planned. So if you guys are listening to us, whether it be on No Filter Network or on YouTube, just wait. Next year, 2025 is going to be a wild year for us and the site. There's a lot of exciting things to come. And with that being said, again, just talking a little bit more about what we're hoping to bring to you guys. We're hoping to bring news coverage, talking about some of the news that's going on within the motorsports world of that week. We're also planning on talking about races and recapping them from the weekend that was. We also hope to maybe have some guests on the show as well, maybe some current drivers or even former drivers, team members, just anybody involved in the motorsports world that we think could be a great add-on here to our show to have on to give you guys that exclusive coverage. We want to give you that opportunity to see within the motorsports world because it really is a thing, Liam, and obviously me and you covering racing and being involved with racing. It's something obviously that we are very passionate about, but we know how much potential there is within motorsports. It is kind of an untapped area in terms of media coverage. And I think there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon with where a lot of these series are kind of pushing their reach out to. So I'm looking forward to being able to bring some of that exclusive content to people.
Absolutely, man. The last few years have been a really exciting time to be involved in racing, to be a racing fan. And I do feel that there's still a lot more to come and a lot of opportunities for people to kind of rediscover racing, as we've seen with the F1 stuff, but also in the domestic American series, in NASCAR and IndyCar. And I'm really happy that we get to service that kind of next generation of fans.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really hope that people are going to be able to take away a lot from this podcast and hopefully that as we continue doing this weekly, again, we could build up that fan base, build up, kind of a contingency of followers. And hey, maybe we'll be like Bob Pockers and doing tweet ups from week to week at track. So you just never know. Hopefully we'll be able to build that. And again, very much looking forward to embark on this new venture with you and with the rest of our team over at ARD. Obviously, and for fans who are about to find out about the rest of our team here at ARD, we got a really, really great group of people who are helping us out day in and day out, whether that be from our photographers to our videographers to obviously Liam and the rest of our writing staff that we have. We got a really, really exciting group of young, talented writers who I think are going to be really good additions for our staff going forward. So I'm looking forward to hopefully bring them on and have them on from time to time as well. So you get to meet the rest of our crew, if you will, here as we go forward. So now that we've got kind of some of the housekeeping, kind of some of the preliminaries of what the show is going to be about. Liam, let's get talking about this past weekend in racing. It was not a very busy slate in terms of racing. Obviously, with it being the holidays, a lot of series are wrapping up their seasons. A lot of the series are taking the weekend off to kind of look ahead maybe to this upcoming week. The only real true series going on last week was Formula One. So Formula One had some action last week and a couple big local track races. I was at the Bill Bigley Memorial 128, which had Ty Majeski, Derek Kraus, Luke Fenhouse was in the race as well. A couple of major runners coming into that super late model race. So a decent amount of local track racing, but also Formula One kind of taking precedent in terms of the motorsports fix that we had this weekend. So I guess let's just talk about overall what you thought about some of the racing that we saw over Thanksgiving's holiday.
Absolutely. Well, it is definitely that time of year where it starts to get a little depressing as a racing fan. Things kind of start drying up, and you're just kind of desperate for whatever you can kind of get. F1 has had a surprisingly cool back half of the season. I think we were all, going into this season a little prepared for another kind of run of dominance, which for the most part, it absolutely has been for Max Verstappen and Red Bull. But there have been some really interesting twists and turns the last couple months, even if at the end of the day, the championship still pretty much went the way that everyone thought it would.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And Verstappen winning last week's race kind of no surprise there. Verstappen has really found his footing the last handful of races ever since he kind of dropped the ball a little bit in the middle months. It felt like the summer months was like the months of McLaren, and then it seems like Red Bull has kind of found their footing again. Although Sergio Perez is in hot water, it's looking like kind of something that we'll keep watching as the season progresses here, or as it winds down with the final race this weekend. So, yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, it's been a wild F1 year. And I really do think as we go into kind of what's to come here for F1, as we go into kind of the future of Formula One, where you're going to see a lot of changes. You have Audi coming in, you have Cadillac coming in, you have the new hybrid systems going to be coming a factor as well here in the coming years. Red Bull may be becoming, or maybe coming to an end of their kind of storybook run that they've had over the last handful of years. I don't know if that's a good statement that I'm saying here, Liam, but or maybe it's a factual statement, if you will. But I mean, it is looking like there are going to be a handful of teams that are going to be making a run for Red Bull in terms of battling not only for the team's championship, but also the driver's championship here in the coming years.
Absolutely. And I mean, the biggest thing is statistically, all good things have to come to the end, to an end. And the dominance we've seen from them the last 3 or 4 years, very impressive. Not many teams have been able to stretch that too much longer. Mercedes went a little bit longer, but as you said, with all the regulation changes and everything coming up, and some driver changes as well, it's definitely going to be a pretty different landscape next season, and especially next couple seasons after that.
Absolutely. It's going to be very interesting to see the direction that Formula 1 is going to go to in terms of the competition. And obviously you're getting Aston Martin coming in next year with Adrian Newey. You're going to have a brand new mind in that team. How are they going to continue to evolve and get better? And with a team that's kind of up in the air in Aston Martin in terms of like what their driver lineup's going to look like for the future, given that Fernando Alonso's not a spring chicken. He is not getting any younger. And then you have Lance Stroll, who's probably their future of that team. I'm interested to see where a team like Aston Martin's going to go, or even like with a Kick Sauber, like how is the new Audi backing going to favor them, or even with Cadillac coming in, like is Cadillac going to be a team that we may say in a handful of years, are they going to be a team that's going to be battling Red Bull? I think there are a lot of question marks as to what is each team's kind of future going to look like as the series continues to evolve and continues to become just slightly different in terms of the competition aspect. I mean, another example too, how is Ferrari going to fare with Lewis Hamilton next year? I mean, that is going to be a big question mark. Is Lewis going to find his mojo again with Ferrari? Like, I'm intrigued about that. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what 2025 has in store. There's a lot of young drivers who I think are going to have to make a mark if they want to stay in the series in terms of some of the new additions they've added in. But also, I think there's a lot of drivers as well who are going to be tasked with kind of learning this new age of Formula One that they're heading into.
Totally. I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on the series at the start of next year. Now that even though Max still won the championship, there is a palpable sense that the winds are changing, and that who knows, it could be a very different story next year. And that's kind of the beauty of Formula One, of racing in general. You never know what that next season is ever going to bring.
No, I completely agree. I think it's a very exciting time to be a Formula One fan. I think Formula One is in a very good spot. It's funny, too, because we talked about this earlier in the year, and you're probably, I don't know if you're going to know what I'm going to bring up here, but obviously Formula E CEO Jeff Dodds had stated earlier in the year that if Max, he would put money, or he would pay money, or he would donate money, or whatever it was, if Max Verstappen doesn't win the Formula One championship. It almost happened this year, Liam. It almost happened. Jeff
I think
Dodds
he probably
almost
got
lost his
very
money.
sweaty there at one point after, especially after Miami. He did bet $250,000.
Yeah.
So
What was he going to donate it to charity or something? I forgot what it was. He was going to donate it to somebody.
it was going to be to charity. Uh, Apparently, it was whoever would win the championship. If it wasn't Max Verstappen, whoever it would be would get to choose which charity it would go to.
Okay.
That's pretty nice.
Would have been
Unfortunately,
cool.
that didn't happen. So
No, unfortunately, it did not happen. It
no money for
almost happened.
charity, but
It got very close. If Lando would have came on strong here over these last couple of races, and Max didn't maybe have the best of races over the last couple of weeks of the season or the last couple of rounds of the season, it very well could have been Formula E CEO Jeff Dodds paying a little bit of sum of money for a charity of the winner's choosing, which I think, and quote me if I'm wrong on this, Liam, I think Lando Norris is the next Formula One star.
I would definitely say so. He taps into the youth. He taps into anyone who doesn't want to see Max Verstappen win, which is a big part of it. I absolutely, especially if McLaren maintains the level that it's at, he could be absolutely one of the biggest faces in F1 in the coming years.
And honestly, and I'll say this right now too. I mean, I think McLaren is the most exciting organization as a whole. When you have your IndyCar team with a guy like Pato O'Ward, who's one of the more exciting names in motorsports right now, you have, as you mentioned, Lando and then Piastri as well, two very young, talented drivers who have both made steps up this year in Formula One. You have a lot of their IMSA and sports car racing programs that are getting really exciting drivers and teams and names within the grid. So I honestly think McLaren right now as an organization is probably one of the strongest organizations in motorsports at this point.
Absolutely. And they bring a lot of marketing for each series that they're in too, which is a big part of it. I mean, you see all the McLaren Legos and stuff they have now. I have my Lego McLaren Formula E car downstairs in my trophy case. So
We
all
both
that
have
is
one.
really important to getting the word out about, not just F1, but all the other amazing racing they're involved in.
I mean, listen, and I know we were mentioning Formula E again but I'm not biased to any team, but the McLaren merchandise is some of the nicest looking merchandise that you will probably ever purchase. And I'm getting a Formula E McLaren polo for Christmas this year. I already know it. It's coming in the mail, and I'm very excited about that. So, listen, McLaren's doing things right. They, as you mentioned, they are marketable. This is a team that has a lot of a fan base that is they're building, and I think it's exciting to see where McLaren is going for the future. I think there's a lot of good things to come for McLaren here in the coming years, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they continue to develop their programs, whether that be in Formula One and IndyCar. I mean, they could be a Penske of sorts, where next season we could be talking about McLaren, winning some major races like the Indy 500, some major F1 races. I mean, it's very plausible that McLaren could be on the same level as a Penske in terms of just success in a season. I mean, this year in general, Penske may have had one of the best motorsport season of any team, winning IMSA championship, winning a NASCAR championship, the Indy 500. I mean, it was a wild year for the Penske clan.
Absolutely. And another thing I'll say about McLaren is, especially their F1 team, really excites me because I feel it's one of the teams where both drivers are really competitive. And there are certain days where you're not really sure who's ahead of who, but I really like seeing that, those teammates are like right on the edge of each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a lot of fun watching that sprint race this weekend where Piastri got I shouldn't say got the advantage. Lando allowed Piastri to move up front. To see that that chemistry that they have with each other and like understanding like who should have the lead at that point in the race, that shows where McLaren is heading and the type of leadership and also the type of teammate bonding, I should say, or teammate chemistry, as I mentioned, that they have within the paddock. That's huge to be able to have allowing Lando, or I shouldn't say allowing Lando, but having Lando back up to allow Piastri to win that race. That is so selfless from Lando that is a big show and sign that McLaren's going to be a very tough team to face, especially when you have both guys towards the top of the grid helping each other out and battling against the other competition.
Absolutely. And, to Max Verstappen's credit, not that he needs too much more because he is there now, 3-time in a row world
Four
champion.
time, four time,
Four-time, yeah, 4-time. It really is impressive, even when you can tell the car was kind of fading out towards the end of the season there, that he still managed to hang on, and he still had these incredible moments to shine where it's just undeniable that it is the driver behind the wheel that's really making that happen, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. In other news this weekend, again, I was at the Bill Bigley Memorial 128 this weekend. Liam, I don't know if you saw any highlights at all or any news on that, but Ty Majeski taking the race win, practically led the way in the super late model race. He had the best time during practice. Qualifying, he set the best time. Unfortunately, he had to start third because of an inverted top 10 that they had. So they basically randomized the top 10 order. And unfortunately, Majeski picked third, but it did not bother Ty Majeski. He made his way up to the front after 18 laps, I believe it was, and was able to grab the race victory handily. Couple drivers of note that didn't have a very good night. Derek Kraus broke his right rear axle in some capacity. His tire was bent out this way, like bent pointing outwards. So definitely not a good night for Derek Kraus in his race. And then Johnny Sauter also had some problems as well. Another very notable NASCAR driver, obviously a former Truck Series champion. So a lot of good racing there. Kyle Larson and JJ Yaley and Kyle Busch ran some races this weekend. They did some sprint car races, some midget racing this weekend. JJ Yaley actually got into the news because he threw a steering wheel at one of the drivers. So in terms of at his car, so you gotta love it, man. We actually saw that this weekend at the Bill Bigley race. We saw a driver throw their steering wheel at Jonathan Nee this weekend. So you just gotta love short track racing, man. You gotta love some of these drivers showing a little bit of temper. I don't know, man. It's something that I enjoy. I don't like seeing some of these fights that happen, though. I think that's a little much. But if you're going to let out your aggression, I think throwing a wheel at somebody, yeah, it may seem a little dangerous, but at the end of the day, it's pretty harmful, and it's honestly kind of funny to watch.
Well, you don't have to tell me about short track kerfuffles because I've seen quite a few of them just in the last month of my life at Martinsville. And I've been pushed out of the way, actually, on the way for someone to try to start someone with someone. So it does happen, and you can say it comes with the territory, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. It does come with the territory, and it's just a part of racing, man. I think stuff like what we saw at North Wilkesboro earlier this year, stuff like that is kind of puts a bad look on the sport. But when you have stuff where drivers are throwing steering wheels at stuff, like yeah, it's still not the best of looks, but out of frustration, it's not the worst thing that could happen. You're throwing it at a car that's made of sheet metal. It's barely probably going to take it any damage to it. So I'd rather see that than an actual fist-to-cup fight in the pits where people are involved. And I think that's when it starts getting a little overboard, such as Connor Jones a few weeks ago, just recently in a super late model race, who will be racing at the Snowball Derby this weekend. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. What a weekend that's going to be up in Pensacola. So looking forward to seeing that. But Liam, we kind of recapped what happened this weekend. Let's talk about some of the news stories that have gone on within racing. And oh boy, there was a big one today. Genesis announcing that their new LMDH program will debut in 2026. And not only did we get that, we got a handful of other interesting tidbits with the announcement. We got to see the brand new car that's coming in 2026. We also got to see who the two new drivers are going to be with the team, which is going to be Genesis Magma Racing, which is exciting. And then we also got to find out that they're going to be running an LMP2 entry that's got some very notable racing names. Liam, this is a very deep news story, if you will. There's a lot of layers to this. This is a very exciting announcement. First off, the car looks beautiful. It's an awesome looking car. You mentioned it. It looks like the Batmobile. Um, and then the driver lineups are fascinating to me. What are your thoughts as Genesis begins this journey heading into 2026? Their two-car operation in WEC. 27, they're aiming to jump into IMSA. What are your thoughts about this and the news announcement that we kind of expected was going to happen? We just weren't sure how early it was going to be. We kind of assumed it had to be prior to the 2026 season, but I mean, what are your thoughts about all this? This is a big day in the world of top level sports car racing.
Absolutely. Well, a few things. As you said, so far the hypercars have been a race to see who can make something most like the Batmobile, and I do believe Genesis can be declared the winner on that as of today, just from those pictures. I think it does show that the hypercars so far have been a big success as far as drawing manufacturers. I'm sorry, I keep saying hypercars because, of course, it is the element.
LMH, LMDH, yeah. I
Exactly.
get confusing with the verbal, verbiage as well, so it's okay.
I just think hypercar sounds so cool and
It
it's so
does.
appropriate for what these things are that I usually just kind of default to that. But yeah, it's just showing how much growth has happened in WEC and IMSA the last 2 years, and how much excitement. Clearly, that so many drivers and manufacturers want to be involved in this, and they do have some very very good drivers with them. Pippo Durrani and good old Andre Lauderer, who is a true gentleman driver, I would say, and very storied. He's seen a lot of different types of racing, so I think this is a really cool lineup.
Yeah, it's a good lineup, and then not to mention their ELMS entry lineup as well for this season, which they will be operating and kind of in partnership with IDEX Sport, who will actually be running this venture. So they will be running kind of the race efforts, if you will, for this venture. Obviously, Genesis Magma Racing is the official name of the team, but IDEX Sport is going to be the operator of the actual faction. Kind of similar to how Whelen Cadillac Racing is, if you're a fan in IMSA. Action Express Racing is truly the team that runs that organization, but they're called Whelen Cadillac Racing. So for fans who are a little confused about all this, that's kind of how that whole partnership is going to be. But in the LMP2 car this year for EMS, for IDEC, you're going to have Jamie Chadwick and Logan Sargent in the car. And those are two drivers that have a potential to potentially be in this Genesis LMDH car come 2026, especially with it being a two-car program. They're going to have two other drivers. How major of a thing is that to have Sargent and Chadwick in the fold of potentially coming into the new hypercar come 2026?
Well, they're certainly thinking about the future. And it is interesting that they're starting with veteran drivers. Pippo and Andre have been around for a long time. Not that I'm calling them old, just that they have a lot of incredible experience. And that's experience that's very important, I'm sure, for them to draw on as they're starting this venture. But just behind, you can there's a sense that they do have that next generation kind of waiting in the wings, and those are two drivers that there's a lot of people have been waiting to see them hit that top level. Sargent obviously was in that top level. I should say return to that top level. But there's a lot of hype around that.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. And I mean, with Logan Sargent, there's so many opportunities, right? And even for Jamie Chadwick as well. We've talked about this personally between me and you. I mean, Jamie obviously has IndyCar that she could go to. Indy next, I imagine she would still run a full season of Indy next if that's how the schedule aligns with ELMS. It's not a long ELMS season, it's a very short season. So as long as the schedule provides, I would imagine she would probably run Indy next season. But then you have Logan Sargent, who is obviously coming in just off an IndyCar test. Many people assume that he might go into IndyCar, given that he's American, and that obviously that would be the most linear kind of succession from F1. But now you get the CLMS ride where it's like, okay, maybe now he goes into top level sports car racing. It's a really fascinating thing to think about. And then there's other drivers And one of the drivers that I'll mention is somebody who we're actually going to talk about, a big news story that happened last week in terms of Robert Wickens, who has an opportunity now to get into top level hypercar LMDH racing. So there are a lot of different avenues that this Genesis program can go to in terms of drivers. Kevin Magnussen was somebody I saw that somebody had mentioned they would like to see in the ride, who is actually going to be apparently running with BMW next year. There's other F1 drivers who could potentially be involved. There's a lot of good opportunities that could come about from this. I am very excited to see where Genesis goes. And I think having Pipo and Andre as the two kind of guys leading this program as it heads into development, I think were perfect fits because they're factory drivers. They understand what it's like to be a factory driver and how testing works. And they understand the process of debuting a new car. They had to go through it in IMSA. They had to go through it in WEC with these new hypercars. So I think it's a great fit to have them as kind of the starters for this new venture coming up in 2026.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
And also too, I mean, you look at it as well, jumping into WEC to kind of kickstart this venture as well. That's a big leap in faith as well, especially where WEC is heading in terms of the financial aspect of WEC. We've seen a lot of teams taking a step back with their programs or having to leave WEC, like Glickenhaus, like Asada Freschini. Lamborghini is out of WEC this year because they can't afford to run a two-car operation. So Liam, you could probably touch base on this here a little bit, but how important is starting in WEC for a team like this, where it is a bit more financially harder and difficult than it is to run in IMSA? How important is that in terms of finding out the viability of the long-term viability of this program?
Well, WEC is where I would say globally the attention still more is than IMSA. Um, so it is a big deal to, well, for one, even just the brand Genesis, right? I believe this is the highest level racing that they have ever participated in.
Yes, yes.
So that is a huge can of worms for their company and all of the risks kind of associated with that. It is interesting going to WEC first, and I assume that has a lot to do with the manufacturing chains and things like that. Yeah, it's definitely going to have a lot of questions with it, and it's a big opportunity for them.
Right now, as we speak, I mean, obviously you have Pipo and Andre. You assume that they're going to be the 1-2 for the first car. Who comes into that second car? Is it Logan Sargent? Is it Jamie Chadwick? Is a Robert Wickens involved? Is there somebody else on that list that I didn't mention? Obviously, I mentioned Kevin Magnussen as well, but I mean, who would be that 1-2 punch? Because not only do you have a WEC program, you also have an IMSA program, and they're also a two-car operation. So you're talking about a four-car operation for a brand new program, which is almost unprecedented. We don't see that. Like Lamborghini didn't do that. There are other teams that didn't do that as well. Like, this is kind of unprecedented for a new program. This might be the most cars we've seen since like a Porsche came in or like a Cadillac. Like, who do you think's on that list though of coming into that second car,
I mean,
or even the IMSA program?
I mean, they're absolutely swinging for the fences. Look, I have people that I would love to see it. I don't know how realistic any of that is. But clearly their eyes are on that younger talent, and not just younger talent, but people who get people excited. Not to say that Andre Lauder or Pippo don't, but there's so much hype around what Jamie's going to do next, what Logan's going to do next. It brings a lot of eyes, and it brings a lot of young people, especially kind of people like me who have only gotten into racing in the last 4 or 5 years, and those are the names that they're seeing and that they engage with the most on social media. So that's clearly where their thoughts are right now.
Let me ask you this: Robert Wickens, is he? I mean, he's got to be guaranteed a ride, right? Like, I mean, as long as his GTD program goes well, I mean, I'd assume he would be a 2027 candidate for one of the IMSA rides.
I would love to see it, and as you said, it's this. Let's see what he does next season. I have very high hopes for him, and it does present, I think, kind of a golden opportunity for him to get back into that top level.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Again, we'll talk a little bit about his new venture coming up here in just a second, but it's interesting for a guy like Robert Wickens, right? Like, he goes from being with Honda and now he's with kind of Chevrolet, if you will, in terms of with this kind of customer run DXDT Racing team. So, I'm interested to see, like, he's obviously back with Chevrolet, a program that he's very um, he's very known to be with. Obviously, running an Indy car as well. He ran with Chevrolet then, so it's like I'm interested to see, in terms of like manufacturer ties, like is he going to still run with Honda in some capacity? I know he had mentioned that in the press conference that he hasn't completely figured out yet if he'll run TCR Racing next year. I'm assuming that it is a possibility he will, just given that he won't be running a full season. But I'm intrigued to see what that relationship will look like with Hyundai going forward now that he's with a Corvette racing team. It's going to be very fascinating to keep an eye on here heading into next year.
Totally. Can't wait.
So,
Can't wait to see it.
and I guess we'll kind of go into that as we mentioned. Robert Wickens being announced as the sprint driver for the DXDT Racing team. This came kind of as, I don't know if it came as a surprise for me because I saw him at the track talking with the DXDT people. I had told you, Liam, that I'm like, I think Robert is going to be joining DXDT Racing here because he had talked to them for like a good hour and a half. Um, it obviously ended up becoming true. He is going to be running with DXTT Racing, which is a team that is familiar to people within the SRO grid. This is their first season entering IMSA. He will run all the sprint races for the team. The team will obviously debut at the Rolex 24. It does seem like he will be doing some testing for the team come the Rolex 24 and also like kind of that weekend, because obviously they're kind of treating that as the targeted balance of performance test weekend. So I believe that they will have most of the cars there that even aren't going to be running in the Rolex 24 will be there that weekend for the test. So um, yeah, it's a very interesting move here. I'm excited to see Robert back in top level series competition, and it's been a long time coming for the guy who had a serious injury that resulted in, basically his lower half of his body paralyzed. And to see what he's been able to accomplish, winning a TCR championship in 2023. I mean, just going on this kind of comeback tour and now back in a top spot. It's an exciting thing to see for Robert, and there's nobody deserving more than a guy like Robert Wickens.
Absolutely. And what an incredible moment and just a confirmation of that this is a journey that he is undertaking and he's succeeding at. TCR already, I don't know if anyone expected him to get a championship, pretty much right out of the gate, but he's proven himself and now it's on to that next step. And now everyone's just wondering what else happens next? How far can he go?
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the big question, right? It's like, I mean, where is that next avenue after GTD racing? Like, does he? And Robert even said too. He's like, if I had to stay in GTD racing for 10 years, I would be very happy and fine with it. And that would be if I completed my career like that as a GTD driver, he would be completely fine with it. And I think that there is more to come with Robert Wickens. I don't think that he's just going to stop at being a GTD racer. I think the competitor in him wants to get up to that top level class. And that's, I mean, he even mentioned it, that's what everybody's goal is to gun to get to that top level class. And I think with his time with Hyundai, with how marketable he is in terms of his story, getting that opportunity to maybe run with the Genesis, I think it's almost a perfect match. It's too good to not have him behind the wheel of that Genesis in some capacity. Even if he ran just a Rolex 24 run, it would be one of the biggest stories of the year.
100%. And look, one thing you got to know about Robert Wickens is he's the most humble, down to earth guy. So when he says, "Yeah, I could do this for 10 more years and I'd be totally satisfied," he totally means it.
Yeah.
But that's not the plan. And he
No.
has his eyes set on some pretty high sights. So I think this has been a very good week for Robert Wickens, and I'm sure all this news is just he's got some ideas brewing in his mind, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think there's two things at this point right now that I think are very plausible. I think number one is he's definitely going to get an Indy 500 ride. It's going to happen before he retires. I'm going to say that right now. He deserves an Indy 500 ride. I think the story of him coming back to race at Indy for the 500 will be something that will be talked about for years. And I do think that he deserves to be back in the car at Indy in the Indy 500 because we don't know. We could be talking about Robert Wickens being an Indy 500 champion at this point, if he were to have still been in IndyCar and if the accident were not to have happened back at Pocono in 2019. So, I'm again, I think that's probably one very plausible thing that is going to happen before he retires. And then I think getting into that top ride with Genesis, I think it's a very plausible opportunity. Now that you have a true top level seat for Hyundai with the Genesis, I think that you have to gift Robert for what he's been able to do, not only for racing, but also for just the Hyundai brand. I mean, changing the racing culture, if you will, and not only that, bringing new technology in the process. I mean, without Robert Wickens' injury, uh, the systems that have been created, everything that we have now would never have gotten to this point. Like Robert Wickens has changed racing in terms of the technology aspect of things.
100%. And I would love nothing more in the future to see him have to make the choice between doing top level hypercar stuff or doing an open wheel thing. He has made it very clear in interviews and some of my brief conversations with him that driving an open wheel car is still absolutely on his bucket list. And I think, on a personal level, very meaningful to him to be able to take on that challenge once more. So I would love nothing more to see him do at least one Indy 500 and get that top level seat. And he still talks about Formula E, even in that press conference we had. It was still floated as something he's interested in. The test he had at Portland that we were both lucky enough to be around for was really cool. He made clear that there are still, as you said, the technical. It's no joke modifying these cars to be drivable for him, and it's incredible what has already been done and what can be done in the future. But his heart is absolutely still in open wheel racing, or at least if he gets the chance, and I hope he does.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so too. I think if he gets this ride with Genesis, right, I think that a Formula E opportunity is probably out of the question. I don't think he wouldn't want to run both a Formula E season and an IMSA season. And for one, it's probably almost impossible. It would be way too much in terms of maybe conflicts with both series. And again, I think right now where sports car racing is, where the technology is that he has to have to be able to race in these series, sports car racing is the best opportunity he has right now, given where the technology that he has is and where it is being developed towards. It's being developed for sports cars right now. And that's obviously it's being catered to him. And I think that Genesis program right now is probably the peak in terms of where the technology is and where it's actually plausible. Again, Formula E, I think, as we obviously knew he ran the test, there is still a lot of work that has to be done to cater to his needs, to make the car as comfortable as possible in order for him to drive it to the best of his ability. And even in IndyCar as well, same situation. There's still a lot that would have to be done, even with a one-off stint in the Indy 500, to be able to have him race that race and make him comfortable, make him, race at the best of his ability. And I think that's what we want to see out of Robert Wickens is we want to see him compete at the top level and compete at the best and the highest level of his own personal competition. So it's going to be interesting to see what that future holds for our good friend Robert Wickens. And I mean, I just can't be any happier for somebody and for what he's had to go through. He's a father now. He's got he's got a kid. I mean, the guy is so humble with everything that he has and what he's been able to gain over these last couple of years, especially in this second half of his career, if you will, this kind of new era of his career. It's incredible to see. And also the guy is so knowledgeable about this stuff that it really does make you respect the type of driver he is.
How can you not? Truly. And regardless of what happens next, what he has already proven so far is, you know, one of the most incredible stories in racing. It is unprecedented. And I think most people would even at this point be like, cool, I won a championship for Michelin. Like that in itself is proving you can make it back, but he's not done. And that is just the first chapter. And there's so much more to come.
I agree. I agree completely. Let's take a look at some other news stories that came out last week. The Cadillac GM F1 announcement came out early last week, and oh boy, what a big announcement that is. Obviously, they are shooting for I believe also a 2026 entry into Formula One. The team will kind of sort of be run by Andretti. It'll be run by TWG Global, but Andretti definitely has a bit of a pull. Mario Andretti is the team director, if you will, kind of running things over with the operations. And there's a lot that is coming with this. Obviously, Ferrari will be will be the first powertrain for the actual team. Then once they are able to develop their own powertrain, then Cadillac will also become a new powertrain in the F1 grid, which is a big deal, obviously. Liam, we'll talk about this briefly. I mean, this is a major deal for F1, bringing in a brand like Cadillac, bringing in the Andretti name in a sense. Obviously, there have been a lot of things that have happened over the last year with Andretti. We saw it, Michael, at the Formula E race in Portland. He didn't want to talk a lot about that venture, if you will, because there's just so much going on within court. This whole situation is very intriguing. It's a bit of a wild, like, this is kind of odd. Like it's an intriguing situation we have here with this new Cadillac GM F1 team.
This is definitely very strange, and there's still some mysteries about it. But I would also say it maybe solves a couple mysteries too about things that happened a few months ago. Mostly Michael Andretti leaving Andretti was kind of a head scratcher at the time, but maybe it's starting to look like that was kind of planned and this was always kind of in the works, and maybe that was a condition of Cadillac getting an F1 team. And just kind of pretending like Andretti's not quite there, but they're involved and they're using their facilities and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the whole situation is weird, right? You mentioned like Andretti leaving the team. A lot of people were like, okay, this is very odd. But now that you put everything together, the team coming in with Cadillac, Andretti being involved with this venture, Mario obviously becoming the team director, like, it definitely seemed like a trade-off. Like, listen, Michael, you have to leave, you have to step down from your role, and then we will grant you guys a F1 team on the grid, and you could have basically operations of this team. And honestly, it's definitely exciting. It's always fun to add a new team onto the grid. We always enjoy seeing new ventures and stuff whenever there's one in racing. And I don't know, I'm intrigued to see where this goes. And there's a lot of people talking about who could be the potential drivers. Colton Herta is a name that's popped up. I'm intrigued about that. I think that's actually a very viable situation. I mean, there have been a lot of talks that Colton Herta very well could be. I mean, he's openly expressed interest in running an F1, and he's been very vocal about that. And then you have guys I've mentioned to you as well, Liam, with like a guy like Norman Nato, who's now with Cadillac and Jota. There are other drivers like Daniel Ricciardo, Valtteri Bottas, Logan Sargent's a good example as well. A lot of other F1 drivers who could be maybe potential candidates for this role. I think it's going to be exciting to see what the future has for this new Cadillac GM F1 team.
Absolutely. And if I were an Andretti affiliated driver, you just said a couple of those names, I would definitely be pretty excited about it. And I would also expect them to be looking into people who have more of an American appeal. And even people like Daniel Ricciardo is actually a very good example.
I threw Daniel Ricciardo's name in my article.
Absolutely. People who are very recognizable here in the States, even if they're not necessarily American. But, Australia is kind of like a pretty close, we have a lot in common right now.
Yeah. So. No, I mean, Daniel Ricciardo would be a huge get. I mean, just marketability aspect of things, and then even like Colton Herta as well. Everybody knows that name. Norman Nato would be an interesting one. I mentioned Norman just given the fact that he's got the open wheel experience. I think he would be somebody that would be interesting. Maybe a Jake Dennis potentially would be kind of interesting. Former Formula E champion as well. But obviously, Nato has the ties also with Cadillac as well, so that definitely does go a long way. So I don't know. There's a lot of different options here that they could have on the table. I think it's going to be exciting to see what they end up, what direction they go into, and how much is Andretti truly involved with this venture? Because you mentioned there is a lot of like kind of unknowns as to what Andretti is actually up to with this actual GM Cadillac run that they're going to have next in 2026. And I think there is more than meets the eye. I think, as you mentioned, Andretti is going to have a lot of control under this. And they actually put out, too, like what teams are actually involved with TWG. And Spire Motorsports is another one that's involved. So technically, Spire's an F1 owner, too, I guess. So Michael McDowell might be an option.
That'd be a real twist. But by this point, I'm not going to make any predictions about it. It's so interesting. I'm very excited to see what happens in 2026. I'm certain this is not the end of the drama maybe around it, because
No.
you do get a feeling that once it does start, is there going to be maybe still a little tension about some of this? Like clearly, the FIA was a little, or Formula One was a little hesitant about some aspects of Andretti. So will that continue? Will we see some more kind of behind the scenes drama with that? I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. It's going to be very entertaining, one way or another.
Well, and remember too, another thing we have to remember as well with the whole situation as well is this is just agreed to principle. So this is not officially in like writing, like signed and everything. I mean, it's definitely on the right track of being that, but it's not official just yet. It has to be like officially put into place. Like, all right, we're getting this team. It's just agreed to principle in terms of the preliminary kind of contract, if you will, between F1 and Cadillac. So there's still a lot that has to be done over this next year, and I think we're going to see a lot more come about from this venture come 2025, and I'm very excited to see that here come about.
I'd like to point out quickly,
Yeah,
preliminary or not, that has not stopped Cadillac from buying ads.
no,
Anyone who's been on Reddit in the last 2 weeks, Cadillac has already bought ads. It's just their unbranded F1 car, and it's like, it's coming. So clearly they're like already going all in.
good job, Cadillac. We're proud of you. We're very proud of you. Good marketing. All right, Liam. Well, we got into some news here this afternoon. Let's jump into this weekend's schedule as we look ahead to what's to come. And there's actually a good amount of racing this weekend. We got a couple interesting events going on. Um, Looking ahead to this weekend, the Asian Le Mans Series kicks off their season in Sepang for 2 rounds of racing there on the 7th and the 8th. Formula One is going to be in Abu Dhabi. Their race is on Sunday night or Sunday morning, I should say, for the finale of the 2024 season. Can McLaren finally win the team's championship? They're barely holding on, but I hope that they can find a way to get it done. The Snowball Derby is happening in Pensacola, Florida. Liam, this is a very fun race, by the way. Really good super late model racing with a couple Cup Series guys. Noah Gregson's involved. Ryan Preece is involved. So there's going to be a lot of fun there with that race. And then our favorite, we love Formula E. They're kicking off their season at Sao Paulo. Um, I want to jump into that real quick, Liam. Formula E Sao Paulo Grand Prix this weekend. Couple new teams on the grid. Apt Lola Yamaha is going to run their first race. Kiro with Porsche. Now they're Kiro Cupra is the new team name now. Cupra is actually involved with Kiro. So a couple exciting things here with this upcoming race at Sao Paulo for Formula E. And overall, what are your thoughts of season 11 coming up here? There's a lot of good things coming here for the series.
Absolutely. I cannot tell you why this race is happening in December. I don't know if
We'll
there's
take it.
precedent for like a season ending. There probably is. A season ending in the same year the next one starts. It's a great race to start the season with. I will say that Sao Paulo has had some really great races the last few years.
They have.
Sam Bird winning last year was absolutely one of the coolest overtakes I've seen in racing in my time as a fan. So I'm really looking forward for the action. I'm really looking forward to see what happens with these teams. To me personally, definitely the Yamaha is the biggest. The Lola Yamaha is definitely what I'm kind of most interested in from a team's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see what happens with that.
I'm intrigued in seeing how Kiro Cupra Racing is going to fare out, or whatever their team name is, Kiro Race Company. I don't know, whatever. I'm intrigued to see where they're going to be at in terms of the grid, because they got the Porsche powertrain, but it's an old Porsche powertrain, right? So it's like they're kind of getting like the consolation of the Porsche, kind of like the sloppies, if you will, from Porsche, if you will. But they're still a Porsche powertrain. Like they're going to be running in a stronger. It's going to be a stronger team. ERT obviously wasn't really going anywhere with how their powertrain was in terms of strength. I'm excited to see where Kiro's going to be. And as you mentioned, App Lola is going to be very exciting as well with Zane Maloney, who just came off of an F2 race last week. I'm actually going to get to talk to him on Friday about this weekend ahead. So I'm looking forward to seeing what his thoughts are with the team, what his thoughts are in terms of where the pace of this car is, because there's a lot of questions with this new program. I think it's going to be exciting to see where they're at in terms of their level of competitiveness. How reliable is the powertrain and the energy in the car itself? Like, there's a lot of it of really like unknowns with them and Kiro heading into 2024. I'm really looking forward to that, and I guess and you mentioned it's great racing too. The Sam Bird Pass last year was one of my favorite races of the season. I guess we'll make kind of like our predictions here, Liam. Who do you have winning this weekend's race?
It's so difficult with Formula E. You just have so little to go off of. Like even if a team is in the lead, you don't really know if that's going to mean anything by the day of the race. And you certainly never know which driver is going to come out of nowhere and take it, or when there's going to be a big crash, whatever. I will say I am leaning towards the veterans. One thing to point out that I think is really interesting about Formula E is that they have a few drivers now that have been in Formula E since the very first season. So they're now on their 11th season in Formula E.
Which
It's
is
been
wild.
like pretty much their whole existence. So people like Sam Bird, I think, the people with that kind of experience, I'm definitely going to be looking at them. But I'm not putting any bets on this because with Formula E, you never know.
Take a pick though. Just give me a pick. Who do you
Okay,
have?
I'm going to pick. I'm going to go Felix Acosta.
I like it. I like the pick. I'm gonna go, and this is tough. I've been fluctuating between these two drivers. I'm gonna go with Nick Cassidy as my pick. I think this is a redemption race for him, if you will, to kickstart his season. The last handful of years, man. I mean, it has just been so disappointing the way his years have ended out, because he's been so close to winning the championship. He's been right there on winning the championship, and then he just falls short. He's kind of been that runner up the last couple of years, and people are just wondering what is it going to take for him to win that FE championship finally. And I'm going to go with Nick Cassidy getting the opening win, but I'm interested. Here's a driver that I think is a dark horse to win the season this year. I'm actually going to give him as my championship winner this year. I have the championship going back to Andretti with Nico Mueller. I think Nico Mueller is going to win the Formula E championship this year. He looked so strong last year with App Cupra, a team that really struggled in terms of keeping up with the pace and in terms of their energy reliability, that I think being in an Andretti car, having the Porsche backing involved, I think Nico Mueller is going to have one of the stronger seasons of any driver this season. He may be one of the stars of the season this year. I have Nico Mueller I have him winning the championship. I think he's my championship pick this year.
I think that's a great pick. Jake Dennis would definitely disagree with you.
I love Jake. We had dinner with Jake.
I definitely feel. I think that is a great pick. I would actually agree with you. I think Jake and Nick Cassidy have the most prove, certainly, of anyone in the field right now.
Yep.
But again, that's the beauty of it. We're going to find out when we find out.
It's going to be good. Friday afternoon is practice 1. We have practice 2 and then qualifying on Saturday with the first round of the Formula E Championship. Kickstarting on Saturday afternoon, man, it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. I mean,
It's going to be great.
What a fun series that is. I just got to say, I love Formula E, and that's how, for people who are listening to this show, that is how me and Liam actually met, is through Formula E. And they do such an amazing job putting on their events and running their operations. I am just always a huge supporter of the series. So, hopefully we'll get out to a race or two this season. I definitely will be in Miami this year for sure. I'm happy it's in my home state, in Homestead, Miami. So I'm looking forward to that. But Liam, with that being said, we wrap up episode number 1, man. We're through one episode. Hopefully we can continue going forward here. Obviously we will. We'll have more shows to come here as the season progresses. As for next week, we'll probably be recapping the Formula E opener. We'll recap some other news, maybe the final F1 race of the season and some other news that comes about here within next week. I will say the following week on December 18th, I will be most likely out of commission, and also the following week after that is Christmas. So those 2 weeks, we will most likely not have a show. I am unfortunately getting teeth pulled out, which is not the most exciting thing to say over a live podcast, if you will. But I got to say what the reasoning is for why we will not have a show. But episode 2, we will be back next week. Whether that be with Liam or one of my other writers, we will find out. But Liam, thanks so much, man, for joining me. Obviously excited to have you on for more shows coming up, and I think we got a lot of exciting stuff to look forward to here with this ARD show.
Absolutely, man. Couldn't be happier to be a part of it. One down, 3,000 to go, maybe. That'd be cool.
I got to like 200 on my baseball podcast, so if we could get more than that, I'll be pretty happy. But nevertheless, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Auto Racing Digest. Again, check out our content. Use the QR code up at the top of your screen to go check out our stories. We just posted something out about the Genesis stuff. There's also news coming out about Andy Lally retirement as he heads into becoming the Trans Am president. So there's a lot of stuff always coming out there on the site. A lot of good content. We got interviews coming out here soon as well. So stay tuned. We're really excited to bring you all this coverage, and we're trying to change this game here in motorsports with ARDs. So just stay tuned for what's to come. It should be a lot of fun. We also want to thank some of our sponsors as well, some of our people that support us. City Garage Motorsports is one of them we got to thank. We're on their car, the number 85 Ford Fusion in the Arkham Menard series for Becca Monopoly. They feature us on the side of our car, so we always appreciate them. And then our friends, the Reese Brothers, we use them in some of our other shows on the Spaulding Media Network. We got to thank them as well for providing us some music for those shows. So we got to thank our friends and our contributors as well with our process as we continue to try to grow this and grow our platform. So with that being said, have a great night, everybody. We'll have a great weekend. Enjoy some racing, and we'll see you on the other side next week for episode number 2. Peace out, guys.